the Middle-aged Bodcast. Getting older, but having some laughs.
Well, welcome to the Middle-aged Bodcast with me, Raging Rich.
And me, Tia Shalana.
And TA, we are back with another guest episode, and we're joined by two guests this week.
Yes, indeed. I think it's the second time that we have interviewed two guests, but we have never interviewed a husband and wife. So that is going to be interesting for us. So we have Joel C. Flanagan-Grannemann and his wife, JJ. Hello. Hello. Thank you very much for being with us today, Al.
Glad to be here.
And I don't know how you want to do this. Do you want to, somebody want to go first, but in terms of sort of introducing yourselves, telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I can go first. I'm Joel Flanagan-Grannemann. I'm a fantasy author. I've written the series called Servants of the Moon and Sun. It's a epic fantasy retelling of Sleeping Beauty based on the idea of what if Maleficent was Aurora's mother and what if she wasn't really evil. And it's, right now it's four published books. We're working on the fifth one right now. We're editing it. And JJ, my wife, is my editor. And, she does everything else to keep my author boat afloat. She's, my editor. She's the web mistress. She maintains the mailing list. She does all the back of the house type stuff for me. And we really work together well as a team. So that it's really, we've done one other podcast together. So this is our second dual podcast together. So it's really fun.
How did that go?
Oh, it went very well.
Fairly well.
Excellent.
I am his audiobook narrator as well, and a book formatter, and pretty much anything that doesn't involve the writing or social media is in my hands.
So it's great to have like a duo where they're kind of husband and wife doing the whole thing sort of between them. It's quite an interesting difference.
Everything but the covers.
Yeah, we're indie as you get. We do everything but the covers, as JJ said.
Well, just out of interest, how do you do the covers?
Yes, we have an outside company called 100covers.com.
Oh, fantastic. Randomly, I am TA's website guy and the cover guy for the last book as well. Just sort of going through. So I was just interested in that because I'd never done a book cover or anything like that before. My background's in web, so it was a little bit strange sort of doing something for a print. So I was just interested in sort of how you both sort of looked into that and did that.
JD found the company. They offered a discount or something, and we started doing them because we had to redo our covers because I had a cover that was done by a friend of mine, which wasn't really professional grade. So we had to get a new cover when we reissued the first two books. It's kind of an artist collective together. We don't really know what the artist is. We work through an intermediary, but all four covers have been amazing. They really fit well with the books, and we're really, really happy with what they do for us.
And they're quite reasonably priced. Their cover packages go on sale for $100 for a paperback, an audiobook, and ebook.
Oh, yeah, that does seem particularly reasonable, to be fair. Especially if they do a good job for you as well, and you're happy with what they produced for that kind of value. That sounds fantastic. So, Joel, I think you've got sort of qualifications in writing, but how did it come about writing this Servants of the Moon and Sun series?
I wrote all through high school and college, but stopped after I graduated. We had moved, and JJ and I got married, so life got in the way. But it always had been a source of depression for me that I had because I studied writing in college, and I kind of always had this feeling that I had like wasted my talent or wasted all that time there. So back in September of 2019, we were on vacation and we were watching the movie Maleficent, the live action movie with Angelina Jolie as the lead as Maleficent. And it was a good movie. But at the end of the movie, I really thought this would be a better movie if Maleficent was actually Aurora's mother, because there was a very good mother-daughter dynamic between the two characters. I think they were going for more of the fairy godmother type of thing. It's really stuck with me that what if that was actually her mother and the curse still happens? How does that work? So I went to sleep. I kind of was half asleep for most of the night, thinking about these characters, thinking about everything about this. And I woke up in the morning and I wrote out this 2 or 3 page outline of what became the first 2 books and into the third and fourth book. And I just started, I found the name Talia in some of the old Sleeping Beauty stories, and I just went from there. And I started writing, and I wrote for a couple months, and finished I wrote the first 2 books together. So I finished those in about March of 2020, right when everything was happening. So JJ at that point had lost her legal job, and she just took the book and said, "Well, if you've put all this time into writing it, let's go through it and edit it and see if there's something here." So she started editing it, started reading it, and we've just never stopped since then. So that's us that's my journey, author journey in a nutshell.
I mean, that's interesting to have written that many books as well in the time frame. I think is what's jumping out at me. It certainly makes me feel like I was being a bit lazy, to be honest, in terms of starting one and finishing one book and now on a second. But in sort of in the time frame you now on 5. So in terms of, it sounds like you've had a real motivation for getting that done. What's kind of helped you to sort of maintain that?
The characters. I'm really character focused. I know I'm very much a pantser, followed by the seat of your pants writer. I call myself a discovery writer. That I know the characters, I know the beginning of the story, I know guideposts along the way, and I have an idea of the ending. And everything between those two things are, kind of decided by the characters. I know these characters very well. As we move through the world, I'm discovering it with them, or we're discovering it together. And that's what drives me forward. And I know these characters. I know what they would do in a lot of situations, but they still surprise me at times. As a writer, you guys are kind of nodding and saying, you've had those experiences of where the characters kind of take over the story, or that they make decisions that are not out of your hands, but kind of just they're decisions that you wouldn't have made if you didn't know those characters so very well. I kind of think of writing as getting to a point where my subconscious takes over, and I know that allows me to access these characters and access what's going on in their heads, and just to move forward with that. And so that that just keeps driving me forward with the plot and wanting to tell their stories.
I'm also nodding as well, because when you said about being a pantser, which I definitely agree with, I'll be the same. And that term about being a discovery writer, I heard you say that, I think, on the Books podcast with Safi. You talked about, and I like that term as well, being a discovery writer, because it's kind of as you're going, isn't it? And you feed your way through. So that really resonated with me in terms of my own approach, I think, to writing. So yeah, I quite like that term.
It's a really fun way to discover your characters and discover your plot, and to just kind of decide. You're falling behind them with a flashlight, and you're seeing the scenes as they see them, and you're discovering things with them. And there are things I know about the world, and there are things, but there are also things I'm discovering as I need them. I don't know everything about my world. I know enough, kind of in the right area that I'm working through, and as I'm moving forward with new characters and other things, I'm discovering these things that fit very well with the world and with the characters. So discovery writer's not something I coined myself. I heard that from a lot of other writers will call themselves that too. I can't remember the actual writer that I got that term from, but it's definitely out there. There are a lot of discovery writers, a lot of hybrid writers. Some people are, you plan, but you also open yourself to what's happening at the moment with improvisation. So it's really fun. There's nothing like coming to a plot point and realizing that you have these two disparate ideas and you find a way to combine them. There's nothing like that. It's almost a high that you're discovering how to work these plot points together.
It's kind of like, to me, and I don't know if this is going to make sense, but it's kind of like you're a one-man Dungeons and Dragons game where you're not only the dungeon master, but you're also the people playing the game as well. And I've never actually played Dungeons and Dragons, so it's terrible me making this analysis. But it's kind of, as you were talking about it, it's kind of like you've built this world, and then, as you say, those characters are making that decision, and it's more kind of, obviously it's still you in a way, but it's the way you're writing it, and those characters kind of form their own personalities that become part of that story as well. And that sounds really interesting. So yeah, I think it's really fascinating sort of hearing that kind of creative process and how it's not, as you say, here is every single thing mapped out. You have the start, you have the end, and a couple of plot points mapped out, and then the rest just sort of all comes together. It's really interesting hearing that kind of process.
Yeah. And all writers are different in how they do it. Some people can't write without knowing, every little beat along the way. But for me, it's just, I know those things, and I know my characters so very well that I know how they react in certain situations. And we just, I'm following them on the quest. Sometimes it sounds a little insane, but all writers are kind of nuts.
JJ, when you first sort of read the book, was it a case of you read it once it had kind of been drafted, so you hadn't seen any early bits, so you all read it in one go? Is that how that played out?
Yes. I didn't want to know anything that the reader wouldn't know. It makes it a lot easier for me to edit if I don't know any more than the reader knows. So I edit as I go, one chapter at a time. I'll edit a chapter a number of rounds. When we first started with the first couple books, it was like 8 or 10 rounds per chapter because they were in kind of rough shape. But now this current book, book 5, we got it down to 3 passes on each chapter before I moved on. And I'll do a set of like 3 to 5 chapters at a time to give him time to come behind and look at my comments and corrections and make changes before I do another round in that set of 5 chapters at a time, 3 to 5 at a time, depending on the book. And then I move on to the next set of 3 to 5 chapters. But I never read anything in ahead of time, and I don't ever let him tell me anything about where something is going in advance because I don't want to know any more than the reader does, because that allows me to ensure that all the plot points all the holes are filled and everything is consistent because I don't know anything that's coming. Occasionally I will ask him a question like, okay, there's this character in this book and they haven't appeared anywhere else and you seem like you're spending a lot of time on them. I just need to know, are they coming back? And if he says no, I'm like, well, then we need to cut some of this because it's extraneous and not necessary if this is the only scene they're in. Or, is this person going to be important later? And if not, we can get rid of this. Or if they are, okay, fine. Do you mean this to be a little bit of foreshadowing to something coming later? And sometimes they'll say yes, and sometimes they'll say no, but then he'll get this look on his face like, I can use that. Now, if you say it seems like it should be foreshadowing something. So that's kind of fun. But I never want to know more than the reader does.
Because with mine, I allowed but my wife was the first person she doesn't edit my books, but she was the first person to read it. And again, she'd not really known a huge amount about it and hadn't read anything. She said, oh, this was better than I was expecting. I was just wondering what your initial reaction was then when you read it.
When I sat down and I started reading the first book, I am not a fantasy reader. I'm science fiction and urban fantasy. I like vampires and werewolves, but I'm primarily a science fiction girl. So when I sat down to read it, I was thinking, oh God, a fantasy novel. I hate these things. They're so long and plotting, and you have to have a map, and you have to have character and family trees going back 7 generations, and none of the names are ever pronounceable. Oh, I hate that. But I sat down and I read the first 3 chapters the first day, and I was like, that was better than I thought it was going to be. I think we can actually do this. I think I might be able to survive this.
You've got great names as well for these books, isn't it? I think you've got, is it Talia, Heir to the Fairy Realm was the first one. And then you got Talia on the Shore of the Sea, Fairy Court in Exile, and Mother of Exiles.
And the reason the first 2 are both Talia is because they were originally one book. And they had to be split in half because otherwise it would have been 850, 900 pages.
And that's why book 1 ends in a bit of a cliffhanger. Well, not a bit of a cliffhanger. It ends in a cliffhanger. Yes. So that was once we decided we needed to split the books, I kept, figuring out where to break it. And that would be that cliffhanger was the best point to do that. So book 1 and book 2 should be really read together and then go on from there.
And what reaction have you had to the books?
Mostly positive. I've had some, I had a 1-star review, but they didn't give a reason for that. But other than that, we've had very positive reviews. Some people have said, it's I don't usually read fantasy, but these are good. How did somebody put it, dear? These are fantasy books for people who don't read fantasy. Was something like that?
Yes. And multiple people have said that. We've had like a dozen different people say, I don't normally read fantasy, but this was really good. I really enjoyed this and I plan to read the rest. We don't really read fantasy. Yeah. So it's not just me. This is fantasy for non-fantasy lovers.
My fantasy is not, it's more character focused, it's more dialogue focused, it's not focused on, long descriptions, long battle scenes. I'm not very good at writing fight scenes, or at least I'm getting better at it. It's going to have to get better for these next few books. But, I focus on dialogue. I focus on character development. I focus on, the world. I've been very praised for my world building. And I kind of just look at it like I'm just showing, I'm creating this and I'm showing it. I'm figuring it out as I go along. But there's a lot of things in the world that you have to explain as a fantasy author. And I like to describe them through the characters and through their experiences, not sitting down and saying, okay, this is how the government works. This is how this works. I like to do that through the characters and through their interactions, that you're learning about the world as some of the characters are learning. Because I hate it in a fantasy novel when two mages sit down and tell each other, this is how magic works. Because each of them should know how magic works. Unless they're somebody teaching somebody a characteristic that they don't know about. So if they're two masters who are just talking about how magic works is at a first grade level, that's kind of silly. That's so I try to avoid that.
Avoid info dumps.
Yes.
And my thing was we needed to make sure all the names were pronounceable. Some of them might be weird, but they're pronounceable.
So people remember them.
Yes.
Yes.
How many, you say do more the fifth book, and how many books are you planning to write?
We've got this one we're editing now. There's another book that's already written that's ready for editing for next year. I've got a half of one written, and they sort of exist in arcs. So after the first two books, I have a lot of characters, so be warned about that. But I have a lot of characters, and the characters set off in different directions at the end of book 2. And book 3 takes over with the fairies and where they go from there. Book 4 and 5 are the Exile Forest, which is an area of sanctuary. You were saying, dear?
Is it just half of the fairies in book 3?
Yes, half of the fairies in book.
Talia's group we haven't dealt with yet. They're a separate book.
Yeah. So, and then, 4 and 5 take over the Exile Forest, which is a place of sanctuary for a lot of half fairies and women with half fairy children. So that these books begin the Aurora growing up arc of the story, which follows the Elianites, which is what I call the half fairies in my world. I've got plans for a book that's sequel to Fairy Court in Exile, wrapping up some of the storylines from that one and beginning another arc of the fairies. And then there's going to be an arc about the what we call the Elan Towns, which is kind of an area between the two human and fairy realms, and that will be the book that we're going to be working on next year. And then there's going to be a book on pretty much Talia and where she's been since the end of book 2. It's kind of going to be a kind of a Wheel of Time sort of amount of books. They're operating in separate arcs that you can kind of read the arcs separately, but they also are going to intersect in interesting ways. So there's going to be characters that'll crop up throughout the books that from one set of arcs that will show up in the other books. So it's really fun. And honestly, I don't know how many books it's going to wind up being. And to people who say, I don't want to start a series until it's done, I really don't know what to tell you, because I'm writing them as I go, and we're kind of figuring out as it works.
But long story short, he has at least pieces of books through 10 on our shared drive where we keep our files. Yeah. So up through at least 10 minimum.
Fantastic. I mean, you mentioned that about people who don't like to start a series until they're finished. But actually looking at quite a lot of books that are out there, I'm thinking like the Harry Potters and probably like Twilight and things like that. A lot of those books kind of became movies that gained that sort of new audience, but the books were still ongoing and people were still reading them at that point. So hopefully there's a lot of readers out there that will be picking up your books and joining that journey, regardless of it not being a finished set of stories, and continue going. And then there's that anticipation of when a new book comes out and getting to sort of pre-order and sort of waiting for that book to come out and then seeing what happens to these characters. So I think it's really good that you've got plans for them, but also that sort of anticipation is building with the reader base as well.
And with some series, if your first 2 books don't sell, you don't finish the series. So, if you're working to traditional publishing or maybe in a hybrid publishing, if your first 2 books don't sell, your publisher might drop you, and that's the end of your series. So being indie is one of those things that helps out a lot with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got that control over it as well, haven't you, in terms of putting that out there, and the fans that you find, you haven't got that issue then, as you said, being drop by a traditional publisher. Interestingly, I think your first book was recently covered on the Strangers in Fiction podcast, which is co-hosted by Sora Sullivan and again Safi, a good friend of our show as well. Now that they praised it for its sort of authentic representation of female and diverse characters and relationships and darker societal themes. How do you approach that kind of representation in your writing?
I approach it like as a person who's been in the humanities my entire life. I've worked retail almost my entire adult life. I've been around a lot of women. I've been around a lot of diverse people, a lot of people, and especially working retail, you meet all kinds of different people. Interacting with them is a daily thing with me. So I know a lot of different people, and through the things through the other things we've done in our lives, I've met a whole lot more, and I just kind of project myself into these lives. And, I may not know exactly what it means to be pregnant, to be queer or anything like that, but I can put myself in those shoes. I can at least get an idea of what they might be feeling and how they deal with life. And I have friends and I have all kinds of other ways I can get more information. I have people I can go to. Twitter and Blue Sky are a great asset for finding out about diversity and finding out other ways of life. And that's what we do as writers. If we just wrote about who we are and living in our own skin, we'd never write beyond, our front door. As an empathetic person, I project myself into these characters and I think, well, what would they do? I know what I would do, but how would they deal with this situation differently? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that's what JJ is here to help me, to rein me in and say, well, I don't think this character would have done that, or maybe you need to push a little farther on this one. I'm taking all these characters from my imagination, but I'm also getting inspiration from the people in my life and all the people I've interacted with. For example, I have some horrible bosses, and they have inspired how I deal with the villains. You take pieces of yourself, you take pieces of your experiences, and you put them through the prism of your characters and your story, and it comes out something different.
The one thing Joel often forgets to mention is that he grew up on the remains of a 1960s hippie commune. So he was raised by a very strong mother and in a community with lots of very strong women. And that greatly shaped who he is as a person and who his characters are and his understanding of women. That too.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And obviously comes through with these characters being primarily a lot of female characters in the books and obviously getting that kind of mindset, like you say, where you can project yourselves into those characters as well. JJ, we've mentioned that you work as the editor for the books. How do you kind of find working with your husband on these books? And by the way, Joel, don't worry, we're going to be going the other way and then address you as well.
It's made easier by the way we do it. We keep things separate in that he works very early. He works generally 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. I don't start working on his books until around 12:30 in the afternoon, and I work from 12:30 to 6, so we have a little bit of overlap when he gets home, but we keep it separate. We work like we're on this podcast right now in opposite ends of the house when we are in overlapping time. I will start work at 12:30 while he's still at work, and I'll work on some chapters. And I make the edits in the chapters in Word through track changes. And if I have any comments to him about something, we use the comments in the Word feature. And I save the files to the cloud. He'll come home and he'll start downloading the chapters that I've done while he was at work that day. And I'll continue working ahead. That's why we generally work in 3 to 5 chapter clumps, so that we don't overrun each other and I'm not waiting on him and he's not waiting on me. And he'll review what I've worked on earlier in the day and respond to my comments and save the changes back up to the cloud. And then I go back on my next round through and download the chapter and do it again. And then at the end of the day, if there's anything that we have disagreements about or things to argue about, we do that over dinner, when we are sitting on our recliners beside each other eating. So we're not staring at each other having a fight, but we're arguing as we eat and discussing the points of each argument and making our decisions and hashing things out. But the way we're doing it in separate rooms on opposite sides of the house, it's through the word comments, allows him sometimes, if I say something that he's a little annoyed about, allows him to calm down a bit before he responds. And the fact that I usually won't get to it for the second round to the following day gives me time to have a little perspective on the issue as well before we hash it out if we need to. But 99% of the time, he just accepts my changes and moves on.
Fantastic. And Joel, sort of putting that question to you, how do you find it working with JJ?
I mean, it works very well. I mean, that the system it took us a little bit to figure out that system, but once we did, it rolls very, very well. I mean, when we were editing book 1 and book 2, it took us it took many passes to get to a point where we were both happy with the story. Happy with the individual chapters. We've been together for a long time, so we have a shorthand with ourselves anyway. So we've developed, a writer-editor shorthand with ourselves even more. I respect her judgment, and I know she knows what she's doing when she's, making these changes. And only if there's something specific, she'll change. Like, for example, there was a short story we were doing, and I described the character as bitter in a series of descriptions, described him as bitter, and he needed that was integral to his character, and she took that bitter out, replaced it with something else at one point on one pass in the story, and I said, that really needs to be back in there because that's who he is. Bitterness is a key point of his personality, so we put that word back in and went forward from there, and it's just this dual respect for each other. She respects my story. I respect her editing abilities. So, I mean, it works very well. I mean, even when she said there's this whole chapter of Mother of Exiles that we need to pull out because, this is a whole new character that you've just invented for this one chapter. And, we just move on from there. And, I was a little disappointed because I worked hard on that chapter because it was one of those explanation chapters of a lot of some things that go on in the Exile Forest, of how new people come there, how they are integrated into the community of the Exile Forest. And she was like, well, yeah, it's this conversation from earlier. If this character's not coming back, if she's just there for this one chapter, we can do without it. We can pull this chapter out and we can use it as a short story sometime in the future. And I was like, okay, it took me like half a day, but then, said, you know best. And, we moved on from there.
It's great because it sounds like you found a really good way of kind of overcoming these creative differences. How do you do that without that spilling out, if you do disagree, without that spilling out, beyond, should we say, the author-editor relationship into, over dinner sort of trouble?
We try not to. We do our best. I'm not a very conflict pro person, so I try to stay out of conflicts as much as I can. We respect each other. We respect our relationship. We respect our married relationship. We also respect our author-editor relationship. So if there's something that's really important to me, I'll make that known. If there's something she has something that's very important to her, she'll make that known, and we'll figure out a compromise. Whether it's, you're pulling that chapter out or changing that word or putting those words or those phrases back in, it just kind of works. We've been together a long time and we know each other very well. And we just, it just kind of works. I don't know what else. Dear, do you have anything else to that?
No, we just find something we both can live with. Sometimes if there's something we're arguing over and we both have disparate opinions that we can't reconcile, we find a way to just rewrite the whole sentence or the whole paragraph or the whole scene where we take care of the issue. And that makes the whole thing better in the end. But that's very, very rare that we can't come to an agreement.
Yeah, and it's always serving the story. It's always serving the book. It's always serving our characters. It's always serving the plot moving forward. So, and there was a point in the early editing where she made a comment about something, and I kind of reacted very badly to it, and we just we moved on from that. So it is what it is at some points, and but you always go from a point of love, a place of love and a place of respect.
You can't really go wrong, I think, if you start it from that point of view.
Yeah.
And even to the point with doing this, joining from separate parts of the house. So if there is a disagreement, you kind of got, it's almost like we're in three different locations here, isn't it? So yeah, you could kind of calm down before, yeah, if there is a disagreement as well.
And there are some times when I'll come into the door and lean on the door frame and say, "Dear, is this what you mean, or is this what you think? Is this what you think's going on in the scene, or something like that?"
It's fantastic, and it's so good that you found this way of being able to obviously keep it separate from your marriage as well. So it is, obviously you've got your marriage, but you've also got your working relationship on the books as well, and how you balance that. It's an absolutely brilliant thing to hear. One of the things that we did discuss, obviously prior to recording, when we were originally talking about you coming on the podcast, myself and TA, this podcast, it's very much about health and well-being, mental health, and sort of fitness, cooking, all kinds of things like that. And you've both been on a weight loss journey quite recently. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
We went to establish a primary care relationship with a doctor for the first time as adults. I was 51 and he was 49. It's the first time either of us had decided to have a regular doctor since we had pediatricians when we were under 18. So we had to have a full gamut of lab tests and full physical. And the results came back that we both had high blood pressure and that I was borderline diabetic. I was the very top level you could be to be pre-diabetic, just 1/10 of a deciliter or whatever it is in your blood difference between being a full diabetic. So we decided that we had to make some major changes in our lives. So we went home, and 2 days later was our wedding anniversary. And over our wedding anniversary dinner, we sort of sat down and talked about what we would need to do. And we were also on vacation that week. We're having a staycation that week. So we had that rest of that week, we finished out some of the groceries that we had in our freezer and in our pantry and in the kitchen. And then the following week, we started a complete overhaul. We immediately cut out all snack foods, junk foods. We were major ice cream addicts. We would eat ice cream 365 days a year, sometimes multiple times a day. We don't have that anymore. We threw out all the ice cream in our freezer. We got rid of all of our junk food. Over the course of the next 6 weeks for me and about 12 to 14 weeks for Joel, we weaned ourselves completely off soda, and we used to be addicted to Diet Dr. Pepper. Now I only drink water except for the milk I have in my Cheerios, and he also drinks some kind of chai tea, but we're primarily water now, whereas we were completely addicted to Diet Dr. Pepper. I mean, we would have 2 liters apiece a day over the course of a day, 6 or 8 cans. It was crazy. And then we also started eating only whole wheat pasta. We gave up eating out at restaurants except for one time a week, and then we get a salad. And we used to eat out 4 to 5 times a week. And we've also changed our breakfast habits. Like we used to each eat 2 bagels smeared with cream cheese for breakfast every day. Now we're eating hard-boiled eggs and Greek yogurt and a little fruit. We just completely overhauled our lives. And I lost 116 pounds over the course of 16 months, just entirely through dietary changes. And he lost about 35 pounds. And then 3 months ago, I started adding exercise. I started taking a Tai Chi class twice a week. And then I'd also go to the gym afterwards for 45 to 60 minutes of strength training and then 30 minutes of cardio each time, twice a week.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is putting me to shame, because I do drink a lot of fizzy pop and snack quite a lot. I have said while we've been doing the podcast, I have cut it down a lot from what I used to do. But I find if I have a bad day, I'll be like, I'm going to the shop, I'm buying some chocolate, I'm going and doing. It's really hard for me to kind of stop myself from doing that. So sort of how have you motivated each other to keep going with this? How have you been able to keep this up so well?
For me, it's easy because I don't go to the store. Joel works at Walmart, so he's always at the store. So if he doesn't buy it and bring it home, I don't have access to it, except at baseball games. And that's easy because I don't like to spend money because everything's too expensive there.
For me, it was the doctor saying you're high blood pressure and you could have a stroke. If you don't change what you're doing, you don't change your diet, you could definitely do a lot of harm to yourself than you've already done to yourself. So, I mean, some of it was about survival. And to be brutally honest, we cut out salt, we cut out processed foods. There's so much salt in processed foods. It's amazing that what's in, like ranch dressing. We love ranch dressing. And just the store-bought ranch has so much salt in it. It is insane. It's like, what is it? It's like 600 milligrams or something like that.
We were
in a
supposed to have
teaspoon.
1,500 milligrams or less a day.
Yeah.
And we would eat gallons of that stuff in a month. Now we make our own.
Yeah. And so it's all dietary changes. And, I work retail, so I'm walking all day, 9 hours a day. So I'm doing a lot of walking. So I'm doing, I'm active, and then it's just changing of the diet, and switching to, as JJ said, switching to whole wheat pasta, switching to whole wheat bread, cutting out the bagels, which I so miss the bagels. I really do. Yeah, I miss bagels and cream cheese. I so miss that.
Me too.
But it's in that changing that, adding more fruits and vegetables. You're cooking a lot more, and I'm cooking a lot more. And so it's lifestyle changes, it's dietary changes, and I still want chocolate, I still want a soda, but I tell myself I can't have it, and because I need to be here for her, and I need to be here to finish my books. I need to be there for my characters. Very borderline of it. It's about survival. It's about being able to live a good life. And, if we had continued the way we were going, we wouldn't have been living a very good life, because, one of us would have had something catastrophic happen to us, and, that wouldn't have been very good.
Have you been back and had the tests redone yet? And how has that been, looking at the comparison?
Significantly lower A1C for me. I was like 0.5 out into the normal range. I completely fell out of the pre-diabetic range and into the normal range by 0.5. Very significant change, with only a tiny increase in cholesterol because of all the additional eggs and stuff we're eating. Doctor was shocked, and she couldn't believe it was purely from diet.
It just shows you then the impact as well of those changes, in a relatively sort of short time frame, what you were able to achieve. I mean, what advice would you give to others, to help inspire them on such a journey?
You got to make the big changes. It's going to hurt, but you get over it faster than you think. I always thought there'd be no way I could ever cold turkey quit soda and sugar, especially the ice cream. He's more of a chocoholic than I am, but I love the chocolate too. But for me, it's more about peanut butter and peanut butter cups. It's the combination, and the ice cream. But I couldn't believe how easy it was to stop eating it. And once I got through the first 2 or 3 weeks. The first 2 or 3 weeks, it's all about the cravings. But then once you get through those, it's like DTs when you're an alcoholic. Once you finish that, you're fine. There's a disconnect in my brain now. I don't crave it anymore. I mean, occasionally I'll see it and I'll be like, yeah, that's delicious. Or I'll see pictures of some new dessert they've got at Disney on Twitter and say, God, that looks fantastic. But I don't have the physical reaction anymore, that the craving and the whole tingling in my brain that I have to have it. After that first 2 or 3 weeks, it was gone. I was amazed. You just got to knuckle through those first couple of weeks and stay away from it all. And now when we go on vacation, we allow ourselves to eat some of that stuff only while we're on vacation. We gain weight, even with all the extra activity of vacation, because we're eating junk while we're on vacation. But as soon as we come home, we're back on the lifestyle plan and we drop that weight back off.
And I remember when we were on vacation and I would get sugar hangovers, because once I went on blood pressure medication, I have had migraines all my life. Since I was a teen. Going on blood pressure medications almost totally eliminated my headaches. And I was getting, a little bit, because all the extra sugar we were eating on vacation, I described it to myself as I was hungover, because I would feel a little bad, and especially the next day, the headaches would come back a little bit, and I'd feel more sluggish. And so it's kind of listening to your body also, and also it's finding ways to make what you like in a healthier way. Like we make our own ranch that's, has so much less calories and so much less salts. And it's very simple. It's just, mayonnaise, sour cream, and the various spices. And it's really easy to do. I mean, it takes a little bit more effort, but once we figure out how to do it, we can do it in a couple minutes and have a couple jars, in the fridge. And how to do we're still doing mac and cheese, but we're doing a healthier version of it, where, we're getting a higher quality pasta. We're getting a higher quality cheese into it. It's it's finding those substitutes. There are things you can eliminate. There are things you can change, like going from white pasta to whole wheat pasta, going from white bread to wheat bread.
Making our own whole wheat pizza crust so that we can have pizzas as a treat.
And going with fresh mozzarella instead of the brick mozzarella. It's some of it's little things, some of it's big things, but it's just about making the best decisions you can for your health and for your future.
And in that sense, and how do you feel then sort of day to day now, having been through that, in terms of your health, your energy, all these things, compared to sort of 18 months, 2 years ago, before you went for those initial tests and what?
I used to have a lot of fatigue. I used to have to nap. I had never napped in my life other than being very, very ill until I got COVID at the beginning of the lockdowns. And after that, I was having to take a nap for an hour to 2 hours a day, every day for most of the next 3 years until I started on this diet plan. And within 6 weeks or so, I was no longer napping anymore. It was amazing.
Yeah, now that you say that, I had noticed that. You never really said that, so that's And for me, it was just like it eliminated my headaches. I still get the occasional migraine attacks where I get the aura, but it's nothing like it used to be. It used to be almost not constant, but every couple days. And I knew what my triggers were, and I could avoid those things, but sometimes it was kind of unavoidable in some ways. So eliminating those headaches, I definitely feel better about myself. I don't have a gut as much as I used to, as I was getting. So I feel a lot better about myself. The whole lifestyle change really amazed me after the first couple months on how much better I felt. That, I realized, my headaches are gone, that I have more energy. It was really eye-opening.
Some motivation for us there.
100%. Yeah, that's really given us a lot of food for thought with our kind of journeys as well. It's finding that motivation. I think that's the thing I need to do now. I need to have that. No, I can't just stop the progress I've made and go, oh, it's all right, I'll just eat this one thing. It doesn't lead to just that one thing. I keep buying other things and eating them. So that's really been an inspirational thing for me, and something I'm certainly going to have to look into. I need to use up a lot of stuff in my cupboards that I've got at the moment, where I've bought things like, you mentioned like the ranch dressing. It's not, I don't think it's really something as popular over here, but certainly I buy a lot of the jarred sauces and things like that, and it's more about, I think, trying to make your own sauces and your own, I think that's really the way to go. And as you say, it just eliminates a lot of those things in there that aren't good for you, that are in the pre-packaged versions.
And then it's the pasta sauce. Pasta sauce is terrible. Even what's supposedly lower sodium pasta sauce still has at least half of your daily allotment of the sodium in one serving. It's insane. So that's super easy to make at home.
I know my wife has moaned at me about I really like mayonnaise, and whatnot, and I know she said how bad that is as well. So it does just show.
Do you have Miracle Whip?
Have what? Sorry,
Miracle Whip. Do you have Miracle Whip in England? It's a fake mayonnaise kind of thing, but they say that's better for you. But we still stick with real mayonnaise because it's better than lots of other options. We just try and use a lot less of it.
Yes.
And like the ranch dressing that we make is half ranch dressing, or half mayonnaise and half sour cream. Well, actually about a third, because there's milk, mayonnaise, and sour cream, and then the spices, as opposed to doing something full mayonnaise.
And there's also the ways you can find substitutes for the things you like. That if you're really into chips, you can find, low sodium versions of it. You do popcorn instead of salty chips, or you can make your own. We tried making kind of this baked toasted chickpeas with cinnamon. And that turned out, okay. I think I overcooked them a little bit, but we were going to try that again. Finding some more healthier options, going with, vinaigrette instead of a ranch dressing, and, going, grilled chicken instead of fried chicken. Sometimes you can't make those big changes all at once. If you need that the inspiration, you can go for those little incremental changes in your life. that you aren't just going cold turkey. And sometimes maybe you have to. Maybe there are things you have to cut directly out of your life like that. But there are things you can, cut back on. I said it took me a while to get off soda because I had that, that caffeine. I had that caffeine in the morning, is for my mid-morning break, and I kind of needed that caffeine to keep me going. So I would change to the chai, which gives me that little bit of caffeine, but also at a lesser calories. It just more healthier for you. So it's, there are things you can stop, and there are things you can cut back on, and it's figuring out what those things are for you. It's not a one size fits all like with anything. If you like soda, cut down to one a day. If you really need a soda, if you're in first thing in the morning or at lunch, do that. But then drink water or something else, some other substitute for the rest of your meals. Sometimes you can, sometimes you're going to fall off the wagon, and you have to be kind to yourself and say, okay, I did this one. We had some peanut butter cups last night, but that was just one time deal. So we move on from that. Or we have a little bit of chocolate, but we have that serving size. We don't eat the whole bar between the two of us. We just have that serving size, and we set the rest aside. Sometimes it's getting that out of your reach, getting it out of your, right beside you, right in the cabinet or right in the fridge. So if you have to work for it, you have to get up and go get it. It's not as easy to do if you kind of move it away from you or just remove it from your house, move it from your life completely.
Well, I think that's kind of bringing us towards the end of the episode, really, and we'd just like to say like a massive thank you to both of you for joining us and for sort of talking about obviously the weight loss journey and also your creative projects a lot. It's been a really inspiring episode, and we really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. We enjoyed it too.
Thank you for having us. When you had that episode with Safi, kind of really inspired me to reach out to both of you and say, hey, I have this thing I could talk about too. And it's hard as a introverted person to reach out and say and to self promote yourself, which as indies we have to do. As a shy person, I've had to work through a lot of things. So, thank you for letting us come on and letting us talk.
No, thank you very much for joining us. We do have a tradition on the podcast, on the guest episodes, we always give sort of last word to the guests. So is there anything that you'd like to share with us, or obviously where we can find you as well? Joel, in terms of your books might be another thing, but just anything else you'd like to say to close out the episode.
All right. First, you can find me at www.servantsofthemoonandsun.com. That's our website. JJ keeps that running. And, that's the best place to find me, to links to all my books and to my socials. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky. You can also sign up for my mailing list. It comes out twice a month. And it's just, it's information on our current editing, current projects, where we are in the editing process, also what's going on in our lives, going on our vacations and with our cats, and cat pictures, of course, too. So, but that's where you can find me, where you can find information. If you want to reach out to JJ, you can get any information on editing and how she works with the various editing processes. And as a writer, my 11th grade English teacher told me that it's never done. That a book is never done. It's you get it to a point where you're happy with it, but it's never done, and only you can tell your story. So go out there, even if it's fan fiction, even if it's just I just want to write this poem, just do it, because that's your story, and only you can tell your story. Dear, do you have anything?
Yes, I would say if you do want to sign up for the newsletter, you can do that on the homepage at www.servantsofthemoonandsun.com. And if you do so, you'll get a free prequel short story about a very important character in book 1. And if you want to find out about my editing, I have a page on the website. I'm the hyphenated editor. So you can also just go to servantsofthemoonandsun.com, and my page is the hyphenated editor, which is in the main menu. And as far as your health journey goes, doesn't matter how old you are, how sedentary you've been, how badly you've been eating, or how little you've been exercising for the last however many years of your life, you can make a change that will make you healthier. You can do it, because believe me, if I can do it, started out at 400 pounds and dropped 116, you can do it too. I have faith in you.
That's fantastic.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more middle-aged podcast in your life?
Of course you do. Follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes stuff, extra larks, and all our latest updates.
We're on Instagram and Threads at Middle-aged Bodcast.
Facebook's easier. Just head to facebook.com/Middle-aged Bodcast.
If you're still hanging on to Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, we're at Middle-aged Bodcast.
And if you're on Blue Sky, it's at middleagedpodcast.bsky.social.
Or you can swing by our website, middleagedpodcast.co.uk.
Give us a follow and stay in the loop.
Cheers for listening.
Two best mates here to take you to stand. Rachel, Rich, and TA got your health in the hands. Wayans, laughs, and tales they tell. For beats and nights, the workouts, they're keeping it real. Oh, it's the middle